The National Electrical Code, or NEC, specifically Section 406.8c, addresses receptacles over countertops. It states that receptacles shall not be installed in the countertop surface or within 6 inches, equivalent to 152 mm, vertically above the countertop surface. There are exceptions to this rule. Firstly, where the countertop is part of an island or peninsula and is located in a dwelling unit. Secondly, in commercial or industrial establishments. Thirdly, where the receptacle is located more than 12 inches below the bottom of a wall cabinet. Considering a situation where a countertop overhang is used for seating and is also part of a living room, the question arises whether a receptacle can be installed below the countertop to comply with other spacing rules for receptacles in living rooms. In this scenario, the countertop surface is considered part of the room surface. Therefore, the NEC requirement of not installing receptacles within 6 inches of the countertop surface applies. Installing a receptacle below the countertop overhang in a seating area poses several hazards. Firstly, it can obstruct seating and create potential tripping hazards. Secondly, it exposes cords and plugs to damage and wear. Thirdly, it creates accessibility issues for people with disabilities. Based on the NEC code and these hazard considerations, it is generally not recommended to install a receptacle below a countertop overhang that is used for seating, regardless of its distance from the floor or whether it is part of a living room. Alternative solutions can be considered. Firstly, install a receptacle above the countertop, within reach of the seating area. Secondly, use a floor outlet or power strip placed outside the seating area. Thirdly, consider an under-cabinet lighting system to provide additional lighting and eliminate the need for a receptacle below the countertop. It is important to consult the latest edition of the NEC and local electrical codes for specific requirements and interpretations in area. Always prioritize safety and ensure that electrical installations are performed by qualified professionals. Understanding the NEC requirements for countertop receptacle placement is crucial for ensuring electrical safety and compliance in residential and commercial settings. The NEC provides guidelines to prevent hazards and ensure that electrical installations are safe and accessible. In the scenario presented, the countertop overhang serves a dual purpose. Firstly, it provides seating, and secondly, it is part of a living room. The key consideration is whether the NEC prohibition of receptacles within 6 inches of the countertop surface applies. The interpretation is that because the countertop is part of the living room and used for seating, it is essentially treated as a room surface. Therefore, the 6-inch rule applies. This interpretation aims to prevent potential hazards associated with placing receptacles too close to countertops, especially in areas where people might be seated. These hazards include firstly the obstruction of seating space, making it uncomfortable or difficult to use the seating area. Secondly, the risk of tripping over cords and plugs that are located near the floor or in a seating area. Thirdly, the potential for damage to cords and plugs as they are exposed to foot traffic and other hazards. Fourthly, accessibility issues for people with disabilities, who may find it difficult to reach or use receptacles that are located below a countertop. The NEC provides several exceptions to the 6-inch rule. The exceptions are firstly, countertops that are part of an island or peninsula in a dwelling unit, secondly, commercial or industrial establishments, and thirdly, receptacles located more than 12 inches below the bottom of a wall cabinet. The reasoning behind these exceptions is that in these situations, the potential hazards associated with placing receptacles near countertops are reduced or mitigated. For example, island or peninsula countertops are often used for food preparation or other activities where having readily accessible receptacles is more important than avoiding potential seating obstructions. In commercial or industrial establishments, the electrical systems are typically designed and maintained by qualified professionals who can take steps to mitigate any potential hazards. Receptacles located more than 12 inches below the bottom of a wall cabinet are less likely to be obstructed by seating or other objects. The alternative solutions presented offer ways to provide electrical power to the seating area without violating the NEC 6-inch rule or creating potential hazards. Firstly, installing a receptacle above the countertop, within reach of the seating area places the receptacle in a location that is both accessible and compliant with the NEC code. Secondly, using a floor outlet or power strip placed outside the seating area provides electrical power without obstructing seating or creating tripping hazards. Thirdly, considering an under-cabinet lighting system to provide additional lighting and eliminate the need for a receptacle below the countertop addresses the need for lighting without requiring a receptacle in a potentially hazardous location. It is important to carefully consider the specific needs and layout of the space when choosing an alternative solution. It is also important to consult with a qualified electrician to ensure that the electrical installation is safe and compliant with all applicable codes and regulations. In addition to the NEC code and hazard considerations, there are other factors to consider when deciding where to place receptacles in a living room with a countertop overhang used for seating. These factors include firstly the overall design of the room, secondly the placement of furniture and other objects, thirdly the needs and preferences of the occupants. The goal is to create an electrical system that is both safe and convenient to use. It is also important to consider the aesthetics of the electrical installation. Receptacles should be placed in locations that are both functional and visually appealing. The NEC is a comprehensive set of standards for electrical installations. It is updated every 3 years to reflect the latest advances in technology and safety practices. It is important to stay up to date on the latest edition of the NEC and to consult with a qualified electrician to ensure that electrical installations are performed safely and correctly. The NEC is not a law, but it is widely adopted by state and local jurisdictions as a basis for their electrical codes. This means that compliance with the NEC is often required by law. Failure to comply with the NEC can result in fines, penalties, and even legal action. The NEC covers a wide range of electrical topics, including firstly, wiring methods, secondly, overcurrent protection, thirdly, grounding, fourthly, equipment installation, fifthly, special occupancies. The NEC is a valuable resource for electricians, contractors, and anyone else involved in electrical work. It provides clear and concise guidance on how to install and maintain electrical systems safely and effectively. In addition to the NEC, there are other resources available to help people understand and comply with electrical codes. These resources include firstly, training programs, secondly, educational materials, thirdly, online forums. By taking advantage of these resources, people can learn more about electrical safety and ensure that their electrical installations are up to code. Electrical safety is a serious matter. It is important to take the necessary precautions to protect oneself and others from electrical hazards. These precautions include firstly, always turning off the power before working on electrical equipment. Secondly, using insulated tools. Thirdly, wearing appropriate personal protective equipment. Fourthly, never working on electrical equipment when wet. By following these precautions, people can reduce the risk of electrical shock, burns, and other injuries. If unsure about any aspect of electrical work, it is always best to consult with a qualified electrician. An electrician can assess the situation and provide expert guidance on how to proceed safely and effectively. Electrical work should only be performed by qualified individuals. Attempting to perform electrical work without the proper training and experience can be dangerous and can lead to serious injuries or even death. The information provided is intended for educational purposes only and should not be considered a substitute for professional advice. Always consult with a qualified electrician before performing any electrical work. The specific requirements of the NEC and local electrical codes may vary depending on the location and the type of electrical installation. It is important to consult with the appropriate authorities to determine the applicable requirements in specific area. Countertop receptacle placement is an important aspect of electrical safety and compliance. By understanding the NEC code and hazard considerations, it is possible to create electrical systems that are both safe and convenient to use. When addressing the specific scenario, the critical point is the dual-use nature of the countertop area, firstly, as seating and secondly, as part of the living room space. The question revolves around whether the need to provide adequate receptacle coverage for the living room under the 2-foot rule of rise, the restriction of placing receptacles within 6 inches of the countertop surface, given its use for seating. The NEC intent is to prevent unsafe conditions and potential hazards. The hazards associated with placing receptacles under a countertop overhang used for seating are significant enough to warrant the restriction, even if it means adjusting the placement of receptacles to meet the living room's coverage requirements. Firstly, consider the physical obstruction. A receptacle placed under the overhang can interfere with comfortable seating, especially if cords are plugged into it. Secondly, tripping hazards arise as cords dangle or stretch across the seating area, posing a risk to anyone walking nearby. Thirdly, there is potential for damage to the cords and plugs themselves. The overhang might create a pinch point or expose the connections to accidental impacts from people sitting or moving around. Fourthly, accessibility concerns come into play. Reaching a receptacle tucked under an overhang can be difficult, particularly for individuals with mobility issues. The exceptions listed in the NEC don't apply in this case. It's not an island or peninsula solely used for countertop activities. It's a multifunctional space that includes a seating area. The commercial or industrial establishment exception also doesn't apply because the context is a dwelling unit. The exception for receptacles more than 12 inches below a wall cabinet isn't relevant either, as the issue is the proximity to the countertop surface and the seating area, not the relationship to a wall cabinet. Given these considerations, the recommended approach is to explore alternative receptacle locations that comply with both the NEC and the functional needs of the living room. Here are some practical alternatives. Firstly, consider placing receptacles on adjacent walls, ensuring they are within the required spacing for the living room. This might involve strategically positioning furniture to allow for accessible receptacle placement. Secondly, explore the possibility of using floor receptacles faced away from the immediate seating area to avoid tripping hazards. These can provide power without violating the countertop clearance rule. Thirdly, if possible, integrate receptacles into the countertop surface itself, but only if it's an island or peninsula where the exception applies. This would require careful planning during construction or renovation. Fourthly, utilize power strips with surge protection that can be discreetly placed on top of the countertop or on a nearby surface, ensuring they don't create a tripping hazard or obstruct seating. Fifthly, look into furniture with built-in power outlets. This is becoming increasingly common and can provide convenient power access without requiring additional receptacle installations. In summary, the NEC focus on safety and hazard prevention takes precedence in this scenario. The countertop's use for seating means that placing receptacles underneath it is not advisable, even if it seems to be the most direct way to meet the living room's receptacle spacing requirements. A more creative and code-compliant solution should be sought to ensure both safety and functionality. The interpretation provided emphasizes the paramount importance of safety and code compliance when making electrical installation decisions. In the described scenario, the dual use of the countertop area firstly as seating and secondly as part of a living room introduces a conflict between the general requirement for receptacle spacing in living rooms and the specific restriction on placing receptacles too close to countertop surfaces. The NEC primary goal is to safeguard people and property from hazards arising from the use of electricity. This principle guides the interpretation of code requirements and the selection of appropriate installation methods. The hazards associated with placing receptacles under a countertop overhang used for seating are significant. These hazards include firstly, physical obstruction of the seating area, making it uncomfortable or unusable. Secondly, tripping hazards caused by cords running across the seating area. Thirdly, potential damage to cords and plugs due to their exposure to foot traffic and other hazards. Fourthly, accessibility issues for individuals with mobility impairments. The NEC provides exceptions to certain rules, but these exceptions are carefully defined and are not intended to be applied loosely. In the scenario, the exceptions for islands or peninsulas or commercial or industrial establishments do not apply. The countertop is not solely an island or peninsula. It is part of a living room and is used for seating. Therefore, the general restriction on placing receptacles within 6 inches of the countertop surface remains in effect. The alternative solutions presented offer ways to address the need for receptacle coverage in the living room without compromising safety. Firstly, placing receptacles on adjacent walls requires careful planning to ensure that they are accessible and meet the spacing requirements. Secondly, using floor receptacles is a viable option, but it is important to locate them away from high-traffic areas to minimize tripping hazards. Thirdly, integrating receptacles into the countertop surface is only permissible if the countertop qualifies as an island or peninsula under the NEC definition. Fourthly, power strips and furniture with built-in outlets can provide convenient power access, but they must be used in a way that does not create tripping hazards or other safety concerns. It is crucial to involve a qualified electrician in the planning and execution of any electrical work. An electrician can assess the specific circumstances, interpret the applicable code requirements, and recommend the safest and most effective solutions. The electrician can also ensure that the electrical work is performed in accordance with all applicable codes and standards. In addition to the NEC, local electrical codes may impose additional requirements. It is essential to comply with both the NEC and local codes to ensure that the electrical installation is safe and legal. The principle of prioritizing safety over convenience should always guide electrical installation decisions. In the described scenario, placing receptacles under the countertop overhang may seem like the most convenient way to meet the living room's receptacle spacing requirements, but it is not the safest option. By considering alternative solutions and consulting with a qualified electrician, it is possible to achieve both safety and functionality.